electronics. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's getting crazy. Yo, how many signs do it take to watch the clock tick down to a red light stop? Birds can't fly once you kill the plot. Drop out the sky like original mop. Too many can't see the simple signs. Too much TV and simple minds. Fish don't float when they hit the shore. Can't swim down the river no more. People need love, get some of the kids. If you can't reach the youth, then develop a bridge. Ain't too much that I haven't did except walk across the desert to a pyramid. Get away from the crazy things. Just look for the signs on the movie screen. The games that people play, the songs they sing today. The words get in your brain. That's when we act the same. By the hour, the minutes, seconds, bytes and frames. I got to get away. Get away, get away. I got to get away. I got to get away. How many MCs still on this? MP3 or microchip? Everything changed, but the move came swift. Selling music out the trunk, make the whole thing stiff. Run away with the game on lock, right here, right now. The beat go drop with so much drama and so much pain. I could put it in the music, but what would it gain? The next time you might see me, I'm caught up in a scandal on your TV. Run away, cause it's all a trap. Trying to make a living, all I do is that. I got to get away. I got to get away, away. Just look for the signs on the movie screen. The games that people play, the songs they sing today. The words get in your brain. That's when we act the same. By the hour, minutes, seconds, bytes and frames. I got to get away. Get away, get away. I got to get away. I'm just waiting for my taskbar. I always like to get stuck for no reason. I'd be like, what's up with that? So anyway, hold on. All right. This first brother here. Hey, what's up, Uncle Black? I'm glad you're in the building. Now look, I'm only going to show the image of five astronauts, but there is at least 18 black astronauts. Okay, the first picture is this is Ed Dwight. All right, this first guy is Ed Dwight, and you're going to see a picture of Robert Henry Lawrence Jr. And then you're going to see a picture of May C. Jemison. Then you're going to see a picture of Ronald McNair and Michael P. Anderson. Now, these are just
5 that I chosen for visuals, but there is at least 18. All right. So, all right, now here we go. Let's do it. Let's roll. I didn't get to rehearse this, so I'm a little nervous about this one. Yeah, yeah, one of the guys from the Challenger. So, so the one on the far left is Ed Dwight, right? Now there are about 2 or 3 OG astronauts that claim to be the first American, the first African American in space or part of the program. Which hey, Miss Meat in the building. So I'm not going to argue about who was first because it just depends on what you're talking about and what part of the program. But through my research, Ed Dwight goes all the way back to like 1933. So we're going to start with Ed Dwight. But it is neck and neck for the title. There's 3 astronauts. It's neck and neck for the title. All right. Yeah, my voice is still not back to the normal. Um, so, for the sake of argument, and it's possibly true, Ed Dwight was going to be the first African American in space until he wasn't. The Kennedy administration sought a diverse face to the space program, but for reasons unknown, the pilot was kept from reaching the stars. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Um, I feel like that person in that episode of Cheers, she used to sing in a cafe and nobody paid attention. But when she caught a cold, her voice was kind of raspy, and all of a sudden the cafe was a full house. And then when her voice went back to normal, the cafe no, people stopped coming to see her sing again. That was funny. Now, in the early 1960s, U.S. Air Force pilot Ed Dwight was drowning in mail. I received about 1,500 pieces of mail a week, which were stored in a large container at Edwards Air Force Base. Some of it came to my mother in Kansas City. Dwight, now 86, recalls. Fans from around the world were writing to congratulate Dwight on becoming the first African American astronaut candidate. Most of my mail just addressed to astronaut Dwight, Kansas City, Kansas. The letter, however, were premature. Dwight would never got the opportunity to go to space, despite the publicity and the hype, for reasons that remain unclear even to this day. Now, I'm not going to speculate. I'm not going to cry foul, but I think we all know. Now, there could be one reason. I'm going to tell you one reason that nobody would even think of. NASA is very superstitious, and your zodiac sign could keep you from going to space, believe it or not. We ain't gonna pull the race card. We ain't gonna but I know black people. It's it's sometimes it's hard for us to keep a secret too. You know what I'm saying? Not not all of us, and we all ain't the same. I'm just saying. So anyway, Dwight was working at the time as a test pilot at Edwards in the Mojave Desert of California, the the U.S. Air Force premier experimental flight base and a pathway to entering the astronaut corps of the NASA. He trained in the Aerospace Research Pilot School, run by aviation icon Chuck Yeager, the first person to break the sound barrier. Edwards holds a legendary status then and now as the premier flight test facility of the Air Force, where the likes of Gus Grissom and Gordon Cooper, two of the original Mercury 7 astronauts, and Neil Armstrong, selected in the second group of astronauts, trained as test pilots in the experimental jets over the vast high desert that often served as an impromptu runway. During his time at Edwards, Dwight flew jets such as the Lockheed F-104 Starfighter, a supersonic craft capable of soaring into the high atmosphere where the pilot could observe the curvature of the Earth. And I know flat earthers are going to have an issue with that. The first time to do this is like, oh my God, what the hell? Look at this. Dwight recently told the New York Times, you can actually see this beautiful blue layer that the Earth is encased in. It's absolutely stunning. Dwight participated in the astronaut selection process, caught the attention of many, including Whitney Young, executive director of the National Urban League, who booked speaking tours and interviews for Dwight with black publications across the country, such as Ebony and Jet. As the eyes of America were on the space race, the eyes of Black America was specifically on Dwight. And I was going to stop there, but my interest is being intrigued right now. I think I want to go on. Thank you, Uncle Black. This, you know what? Let me pause for the cause. This song is called Event Horizon, and it has a serial number next to it in parentheses. Now, the serial number is a letter and number code. The letter and number code is the name of the largest black hole in space. So I thought that this song would be fitting for this subject. So you noticed that, Uncle Black, thank you. And it shows it shows that I can make more than just a rap beat, I guess. It shows the vastness of my repertoire. So I was going to stop right there, but this guy seems interesting. I think if I'm going to speak the most on one astronaut, I'm only briefly going to, after I speak on him, I'm only going to talk about black astronauts as a whole. But this guy, since he's the first, I think I should go further about the information on him. And thank you, Miss Meat 37. So the national attention led to increased public pressure for Dwight to be selected as a NASA astronaut. The Kennedy administration, which campaigned strongly on civil rights issues, had already taken an active interest in Dwight's career. seeing his potential as an important symbolic achievement for both the White House and the nation, well, basically, my tone wasn't appropriate. Seeing that his potential as an important symbolic achievement for both the White House and the nation. On April 12, 1961, Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin complete one orbit of the Earth in his spaceship. The Vostok 1 became the first human in space. The flight captured the imagination of the world, and Edward R. Murrow, a former broadcast journalist who had become Kennedy's director of the United States Information Agency, came up with the idea to recapture American prestige in the final frontier. Peace, Roz. In September of that year, 4 months after the United States sent its first astronaut into space, Murrow wrote to the NSA administrator, James Webb. Why don't we put the first non-white man in space? If your boys were to enroll and train a qualified Negro and then fly him in whatever vehicle is available, we could retell our whole space effort to the whole non-white world, which is most of it. Now, I've never heard that quote. I was never aware of that quote. And for some of us, we're learning this information together. I didn't even get a chance to pre-read this information. Around this time, Kennedy encouraged leaders in all the military branches to work to improve diversity among their officers. When the first group of NASA astronauts were selected in 1959, the nation military officer pilots, initially the only people who could apply to be astronauts, included no people of color. But as Murrow advocated for black astronauts, Dwight was rising to the ranks of captain in the Air Force, armed with an aeronautics degree from Arizona State University and enough flying hours to qualify for the flight test school at Edwards. Edward Joseph Dwight Jr. was born on September 9th, 1933 in Kansas City, Kansas. From a young age, he showed a particular interest in arts. So I'm not going to go into his biography, but he was a good guy. Let's put it that way. He was an altar boy since the age of 5, and all kind of stuff. He, he was involved in a lot of good things. He don't have a shady past or anything like that. I'm skimming through it right now. Yes. Yes. Yeah. But let me skip to one part that I find interesting. As Dwight progressed steadily in the Air Force with a stint at base in Texas, Missouri, and Arizona, he helped develop technical manuals and train fellow pilots on various aircraft instruments, racking up flight hours all the while. Even so, he was told that he would not be eligible to be a squad leader. They didn't want to make a short black guy a squad leader. He says, they told me that the country boy wouldn't want to follow me, so I became the number 2 guy to the squad leader. But I wouldn't allow those white guys to outdo me in anything. That's a quote. While in service, Dwight continued his education, graduating with a aeronautical engineering degree from Arizona State University in 1957. He flew some of the most advanced aircrafts of the era and would ultimately accumulate over 9,000 hours of flight time, 2,000 in high-performance jets. His engineering background and extensive training opened the door for him to enter the test pilot school at Edwards. What's up? Oh, thank y'all. Thanks for the compliments. The end of 1957 was also a pivotal moment in history as the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1 on October 4th. Designed as a science experiment, the satellite still scared U.S. leaders about the potential of Soviets developing advanced nuclear capability. So Lyndon B. Johnson, then the majority leader of the U.S. Senate, remarked as the Soviets soon to be dropping bombs on us from space like kids dropping rocks onto cars from freeway overpasses. Just as the space race launched into full swing, captivating Dwight and millions of other people around the world, America's self-image as a nation of liberty and opportunity was tarnished by the violence and segregation of Jim Crow. The value that the country wanted to project to the Soviet Union and the rest of the world was contracted. It was contradicted by the realities of poverty and injustice for many African Americans. The growing intensity of the civil rights movement played a role in the White House wanting their astronauts perceived as national heroes. To represent the diversity of the country, NASA leaders was no stranger to disarray gripping the nation. They wanted discrimination from their jobs at NASA facilities in the South, such as Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama, home to the rockets such as the giant Saturn V. And in 1963, just a few hour drives from Huntsville, the state's Governor George Wallace attempted to block 2 African American students from registering at the University of Alabama. The Kennedy administration knew that black astronaut would be an inspiring display of opportunity for African Americans across the country. To see and Ed Dwight walking across the platform, getting into an Apollo capsule, would have been mind-boggling in those days. Charles Bolden, the first African American to be a NASA administrator, told the New York Times it would have been an incredible impact. At Edwards, however, Dwight was met with prejudice and scorn, and as he recounted in his autobiography, Soaring on the Wings of a Dream. His autobiography is called Soaring on the Wings of a Dream. Yeager, the head of the flight test school, maintained that Dwight was only admitted due to preferential treatment and that he only passed the first portion of the course in the first year of the school existence with special assistance from instructors. From that moment, we picked our first class. It was caught in a buzzsaw of controversy involving a black student. Yeager recounts in his own autobiography, the White House, Congress, and civil rights groups came at me with a meat cleaver, and the only way I could save my head was to prove I wasn't a damn bigot. I've been to NASA once in Cape Canaveral. It's interesting that you say that. And they had a shuttle mounted up in the air, and you go up a staircase and you stick your head into the shuttle. and the thing looked like a toy. It looked smaller than I thought it would be, and it furthered my belief in the BS of the space program. But let's carry on. But it is an interesting place. I recommend going to Cape Canaveral. It's so secret, top security. They don't want you to see none of the magic, okay? Because it is a place of magic and wonder, okay? What's up, Ferris? I guess we got a flat earther in the building. But I don't know, I'm just kidding. Dwight was one of 26 applicants, the only African American to the second phase of the course, designed to begin space-related training. But he did not initially make the list of 11 accepted. He didn't make the list of 11 accepted students. According to the space historian John Logsdon, in the article in the History of Spaceflight Quarterly, Yeager was contacted by the Air Force Chief of Staff Curtis LeMay and told that the White House and Attorney General Robert Kennedy in particular wanted an African American to participate in the astronaut training. The number of accepted students was expanded from 11 to 15, and Dwight was included along with 3 more white pilots. As Dwight continued through the training, he applied to be a NASA astronaut and was one of 26 people recommended by the Air Force, according to Logsdon. In total, 136 people applied for NASA Astronaut Group 3, and 14 was selected. In October 1963, Dwight was not one of them. And just to make sure we're clear on who we're talking about, I'm going to just have his picture up for now. A frustrated Dwight sent a letter directly to the White House, subverting the military chain of command. The letter was reportedly in response to Gordon Cooper, one of the original Mercury 7s, telling the reporters that NASA never found a qualified African American to be an astronaut, says Richard Paul, author of We Could Not Fail, the first African American in space program. Yeager deputy at Edwards, Thomas McElmurray, later commented that Dwight was perfectly capable of being a good astronaut, according to Logsdon. He would not have been number 1, but if it was important enough to this country to have a minority early in space, then the logical guy was Dwight. But it wasn't important enough to somebody in this country at this stage of the game to do it, so they just chose not to do it. A month after the announcement of the Astronaut Group 3, which included Dwight's classmate David Scott, who would go on to walk on the moon during Apollo 15, John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas. Dwight was resigned from Edwards and would resign from the Air Force in 1966. Oh, interesting, Keith. Still unavailable is a complete accounting from the military space bureaucracy for the reason of the apparent stunting of Dwight's career in space before it ever actually began, reads an article from the June 1965 issue of Ebony. Was Dwight rejected by the National Aeronautics and Space Administration for additional astronaut training at its Big Man Space Flight Center in Houston for purely technical reasons? Or did other factors, such as Dwight's race, enter into the decision to deny him a possible role in NASA's Earth orbiting project Gemini or the moon venture project Apollo. After Kennedy's assassination, the pressure on NASA to fly a black astronaut waned, and the first African American would not fly in space until Guan Buford flew with the crew of NASA's 8th Space Shuttle flight in 1983. That's a long time. In the 2 decades between the white NASA application and Buford's flight, the space agency had a inconsistent and at times tumultuous, I always have a problem with that word, tumultuous relationship with black Americans. This story is so interesting that when I finish the story about him, I don't think I might touch on some more stuff about black astronauts, but this one is so fulfilling and so deep and so long. I think, we might need a change of atmosphere after this. But in 1969, Reverend Ralph Abernathy led a demonstration at Kennedy Space Center on the eve of the launch of Apollo 11. Apollo 11, Destination for the Moon. His demonstration centered around the failure of the country to address issues such as racism, poverty, and hunger. NASA Administration Thomas O. Paine met Abernathy among the crowds at the Space Center and said that he wouldn't launch Apollo 11 if he felt that it would solve the issues Abernathy raised. If it was possible for us not to push that button and solve the problem you're talking about, we would not push that button, Paine said. But despite the economic disparities related to the space program, many African Americans found employment with NASA and rose in the ranks of authority. Diversity efforts were spearheaded by people such as NASA scientist and mathematician Clyde Foster. Indeed, Key, indeed. Foster not only helped diversify NASA recruitment by starting the first computer science program at his alma mater, Alabama A&M. He also served as the first black mayor in the Jim Crow South. Paul says these achievements helped provide opportunities to African Americans such as Buford, Ron McNair, who died on the Space Shuttle Challenger in 1986. Frederick Gregory, an astronaut and later NASA Deputy Administrator, Charles Bolden, astronaut and later NASA Administrator, and Mae Jemison, which we showed her picture earlier, the sister. The first African American female astronaut to fly to space in 1992. They all had their individual struggles to overcome, and they all continued the legacy of Ed Dwight, who took the first steps towards improving diversity in the U.S. space program. After Dwight retired from the Air Force in 1966, he eventually returned to his true love, art. And it looks at life holistically. No matter what you do, be the best at it, Dwight says. A chance meeting in 1974 with George Brown, state senator, and the Lieutenant Governor of Colorado, as well as the member of the Tuskegee Airmen in World War II, led Dwight to decide to use sculpture to tell the story of African American history, something that he did not study extensively during his time with the Air Force. And then it goes into, art and jazz and things like that. He was, Duke Ellington, Barack Obama. It goes into other stuff that has nothing to do with space, but I do find it interesting. And this information came from the Smithsonian.org. So if you want to learn more about Ed Dwight, feel free to go to the Smithsonian.org to learn more about Ed Dwight. Folks be starstruck off rappers, not me. I was speechless when I met him. I heard that. And you met Ralph D. Abernathy III. That's cool. How many blacks in space? How many blacks in space? Well, there's a lot. I think that there's at least 18. I lost count. There's a lot. I can name a few. All right. Guon Buford, Ronald McNair, Fred D. Gregory, Charles Bolden, Mae Jamerson, Bernard A. Harris, Winston E. Scott, Robert Kerbeam, Michael P. Anderson, Stephanie Wilson, Jones Higginbotham, Alvin Drew, Leland D., Robert Satcher, Robert Henry Lawrence, Livingston L. Holder, Michael E. Belt, Yvonne Cagle, Jeanette J. Epps. On January 5th, 2016, NASA announced that Epps would become the first African American space station crew member when she launched on her would-be first space flight in May 2018 as a flight engineer on the Expedition 56, remained on board the Expedition 57, and on January 16, 2018, NASA announced that Epps had been replaced by her backup, Serena M. Anoon, Chancellor, due to unknown reasons, and has sparked various media attention. You know what I've noticed? Every time a black astronaut wants to do something or involved in something, there's always an issue. It's always somebody, always in the background, putting their foot out and tripping someone. You know what I'm saying? There's always a oops. It's a trip. I'm good at noticing patterns, and I try not to, I try not to, I try not to ignore these patterns. You know what I'm saying? Now, hold on. One of the questions is, who was the first black astronaut? And technically, Guion, Guon Stewart Buford Jr., Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, U.S., born in November 22nd, 1942. He was an African American aerospace engineer, retired U.S. Air Force officer, and fighter pilot, and former NASA astronaut who was the first African American and the second person of African descent to actually go into space. You see how technical it gets? What's up, Evelyn Underwood? Don't believe in space and nudie has been there. Big psyops for the dumb masses. I hear you. I got you. Blue in the building. Yes. Um, who was the first black woman on the moon? May Carol Jemison. Let me give her her props. Hello, I'm pausing this for a second. Hello, hello. 1 2 1 2. I'm pausing it. Maribel Reefa's listening. Good. Maribel in the house. Marquise in the house. This is pre-recorded. I did this exactly 1 year ago. I have several Black History shows on private that I kept in the in a vault, a time capsule, and I'm re-releasing these videos again 1 year later. And what I wanted to say is, I didn't have time to dress rehearse this show and the material. So I was reading things for the first time. I didn't have time to practice pronouncing people's names, none of that stuff. So as I was reading, I was putting things together because remember that old game, concentration? You know, I'm good at putting puzzles together. I'm good at concentration. So, I was having epiphanies while I was reading this stuff. And the thing is, we never really go above lower space orbit. That's where we like to send the space shuttle and all kind of stuff and take spy pictures and all of that stuff. The space shuttle always went to lower space orbit. So these black pilots that used to test experimental high performance airplanes, they were qualified to be astronauts because at first they didn't even have a standard for astronaut, and then they decided to let test pilots to be astronauts because they would be the only one crazy enough to dare to go up in the vehicle. So when these pilots wasn't testing the highly advanced fighter planes or whatever, they would be taking pictures over Russia and stuff like that in lower space orbit. Well, if they call the people on the space shuttle astronauts, how come they didn't call these men who already flew at the same altitude way back in the day? Why wasn't they called astronauts? So it took about 48 years before some of these black guys' names was added to the astronauts list. There's a big old mirror in front of NASA with the list of every person that's been an astronaut, but they left out these guys who didn't go up in a spaceship, but they still went just as high as any space shuttle when they went up into space to make to have their mission. And you see how they carefully choose their word. They never really say lower space orbit. They just say into space. So this is pre-recorded. And for those of you who are asleep, I know there's a 3-hour time difference, 2-hour time difference. Some places is 8 and 11-hour time difference. So hopefully people can catch this tomorrow. And for those of you that's watching while they're laying down, when they shutting it down for the day, or some people get up at 5 in the morning, I appreciate it. I'm not doing this show for the clout. I thought this is some interesting information, and I'm going to hit play again. I had just regained my voice. I had lost my voice before I did this show, and so this is all pre-recorded. So sorry about the rough Wu-Tang voice I'm using tonight, on the pre-recording. Let me single her out for a second. Okay? May Carol Jemison, born October 7th, 1956, is an American engineer, physician, and former NASA astronaut. She became the first black woman to travel into space when she served as a mission specialist on board the Space Shuttle Endeavour. Okay? And Jameson joined NASA Astronauts Corps in 1987 and was selected to serve for the STS-47 mission, during which she orbited the Earth for nearly 8 days on September 12th, and it was 12/20/1992. She was born and raised in Chicago, graduated from Stanford University with degrees in chemical engineering as well as African American studies. She then earned a medical degree from Cornell University. Jameson was a doctor for the Peace Corps in Liberia and Sierra Leone from 1983 till 1985 and worked as a general practitioner. In pursuit of becoming an astronaut, she applied to NASA. Please hold 1 second, y'all. Year Starship. She later formed a nonprofit educational foundation, and through the foundation is the principal of the 100-Year Starship Project, founded by DARPA. Jameson also wrote several books for children and appeared on television several times, including in an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. She holds several honorary doctorates and has been included into the National Women's Hall of Fame and the International Space Hall of Fame. Isn't that amazing? Now, what you say? Okay, you guys are talking amongst each other. It is all gravy. Everybody's opinion is valid and relevant and important. Yes, indeed. So, there was one astronaut in particular I wanted to talk about, and his name is Robert Henry Lawrence. Let me look at his story here. Robert Henry Lawrence. I think his story is important. The Man Orbiting Laboratory, MOL. Let me do a sound check. And I know you guys been listening to the same soundtrack over and over. So here's another atmospheric track. It's called Venus. It's called Venus Crossing. So I think it's kind of fitting for the subject also. So the Man Orbiting Laboratory, MOL, was a joint project of the U.S. Air Force, USAF, and the National Renaissance Office to obtain a high-resolution photographic imagery of American Cold War adversaries. Authorized in August 1965, the MOL program envisioned a series of mini space stations in the low polar Earth orbit, occup- occupied by two-man crew for 30 days at a time, launching and returning to Earth aboard modified Gemini capsules. I think this gives a clue to my point that we've never been out of lower space orbit. You know what I'm saying? I think we've been to lower space orbit many times, but never higher than that. And he says, "Oh wow, do you believe that there is a higher energy somewhere out there?" Well, there's two radiation belts, and then we have the magnetosphere. So if you can make it past the lower Van Allen belt and then make it past the higher Van Allen belt, you're still going to be, when you get past the magnetosphere, you could be killed by a solar flare. But we not educated on space, so we just think you can just go straight to the moon and it's all good. We have a asteroid belt, all right? It might have been another planet that exploded or whatever, and that surrounds us too. You know what I'm saying? Now, the USAF selected Major Robert H. Lawrence Jr. on June 30th, 1967, as a member of the third group of the Aerospace Search Pilot for the MOL program. And to let you know who I'm talking about, I'm going to single him out so you get an idea of who I'm talking about. This gentleman right here. Lawrence thus became the first African American to be selected as an astronaut by the National Space Program. Of the significance of his selection, Lawrence said with his typical modesty, "This is nothing dramatic, it's just a normal progression. I've been very fortunate." Born in Chicago on October 2nd, 1935, Lawrence graduated from high school at 16 and earned his bachelor's degree in chemistry from Bradley University at the age of 20 and became an Air Force officer and pilot. Lawrence was a highly accomplished pilot with 2,500 flying hours and 2,000 hours in jets, and earned a PhD in physical chemistry from the Ohio State University in 1965, the only selected MOL astronaut with a doctorate. He completed U.S. Air Force Test Pilot School in June 1967 and was immediately assigned to the MOL program. While serving as an instructor for another pilot practicing landing techniques later used in the Space Shuttle program, Lawrence perished in a crash. That's why I wanted to bring his story up. Lawrence, with all those accolades and all those accomplishments, Lawrence perished in a crash of a F-104 Starfighter supersonic jet on December 8, 1967, at Edwards Air Force Base in California. Although both men ejected from the crash, Lawrence did not survive. The promising career of the pilot scientist suddenly extinguished. He was survived by his wife Barbara and 8-year-old son Tracy, fellow MOL classmates, and later NASA astronaut Don Peterson recalled in a oral history. Bob was a super guy. His death was a terrible tragedy. But me personally, I do not believe in accidents when it comes to NASA. I'm sorry. I don't believe in accidents, but I know they do happen. Oh, okay, I got you, Miss Me. I gotcha. But you opening the door for a deep conversation. It's all gravy. Do your thing. After the Nixon administration canceled the MOL program in June 1969, 7 of the younger under 35 MOL astronauts, Carol Bobko, Robert Krypton, Gordon Fulton, Henry Hartsfield, Robert Overmyer, Don Peterson, and Richard Tooley, transferred to NASA. And since Lawrence was in that age range, it is virtually certain he also would have transferred. Isn't that interesting? I love to read between the lines. I observe, I listen. I listen for the Y sound between the I and the E in the word quiet. The letter Y is not pronounced. I mean, it's pronounced, yet you don't see it. So let me repeat that part. Because all the pilots in that program that was under 35, they were transferred to an astronaut program. And it says, since Lawrence was in that age range, it is virtually certain he also would have transferred. You see, the guy before him, who also test piloted the same high performance airplane, he made it all the way up there to the last stage, and because he was heartbroken about that, I guess, he retired and all that stuff, and he left unscathed. And it took all the way into the 80s for another black person to even go to space. You see what I'm saying? But this gentleman had an unfortunate accident. 2 men, they did an emergency exit out of the plane, but the Negro pilot died and the other one lived. With all these accolades to his name. He would have piloted one of the early space shuttle missions. Because of his untimely death and the relative secrecy surrounding the MOL program, Lawrence's name remained largely unknown for many years. Whoa, let me read that again. Because all that stuff I said in the moon conspiracy stuff I did in the past, this is putting the dots together. Because of his untimely death and the relative secrecy surrounding the MOL program, Lawrence's name remained largely unknown for many years. I said the space program to the moon was a 3-part program. You had the real guys who went that didn't live long. You had the guys who wore the costumes for the filming and the photo shoots. And then you had the guys with their helmet off, the ones that did the public appearances for the interviews. And that's why they can't agree on nothing. Neither one of them says that they saw the same thing when they were on the moon. They can't tell you if there were stars in the skies or not. They don't have any details for you. And one guy refuses to interview at all. He's probably only did 2 interviews in all his years. All right. I can believe that, Miss Meat. I can believe that, because the first female to get her the first black female to get her pilot's license, she had to go to France, and she flew across the Atlantic Ocean before Amelia Earhart, but they wanted to give Amelia Earhart the credit. She had 2 accidents when she was stunt flying. She drew the same large crowd as a as the Bayou Classics would. Um, the first time she survived, the second time she fell out of her plane to her death. She's a veteran pilot, a stunt pilot. How do you fall out of your own plane to your death? Anyway, let's go on. Because of his untimely death and the relative secrecy surrounding the MOL program, Lawrence's name remained largely unknown for many years. A certain effort during the 1990s to overcome bureaucratic barriers over the definition of an astronaut resulted in Lawrence receiving a proper, if belated, recognition. In September 1997, in tribute to his outstanding accomplishments as an American space pioneer, the crew of the Space Shuttle Atlantis carried his MOL mission patch into orbit during the STS-86 mission. The flown patch was presented to his widow. On December 8, 1997, the 30th anniversary of his death, Lawrence's name was engraved in the Astronauts Memorial Foundation Space Mirror at Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex, which honors astronauts who made the ultimate sacrifice for their space program. 20 years later, on the 50th anniversary of his death, NASA leaders honored Lawrence in a ceremony attended by hundreds. And you can find that video on YouTube. Former NASA Administrator Charles Bolden recalled that Lawrence was involved in the development of the maneuver that would become a critical part of space shuttle landing techniques called flare. KSC Director Bob Cabana said, "Major Lawrence truly was a hero. He took that first step, setting the stage for what was to come. His groundbreaking accomplishments more than 50 years ago continued to be an inspiration, showing that excellence knows no color." Read some of Don Peterson's recollections about Major Lawrence in his oral history interview with the JSC History Office. So you can go to nasa.gov. Well, basically, you got to go to jsc.nasa and look for the oral histories of Peterson DH. And you can find out more information. Thank you, Roz Robert. I'm kind of messed up right now. Sometimes I get too emotionally involved in the subjects. Sometimes I get too emotionally involved in the subject at hand. And yeah, thanks, Roz. It is interesting. I wasn't aware of none of this information. I was learning it as I was reading it. You know what I'm saying? I just learned a lot just now myself. And my mind is going a million miles a second. So we need to switch up the tone.
The sound you're about to hear has been recorded using binaural technique. Binaural technique differs from mono, stereo, and surround sound recordings in that you can determine the exact distance and direction.
I think they discovered a mouse who realized that the coronavirus is a serious thing, And all mammals should be on alert because we don't know who can get. Well, I'm gonna fade it out right there. That was the end of the of the black astronaut, and I went on to talk about the coronavirus, and I'm gonna omit that part of the show, um, because I wanted to keep it to the black astronauts. So that was my little pun at the end, starting with the just to soften up the mood and change the atmosphere to talk about corona. So that goes to show that a year ago I was trying to make people aware of corona and what it is, what it looks like, stuff like that. But yeah, that's all I got. Thanks, Marquise Dillinger, for sticking around, and everybody in the background. Thank you, Maribel Hanan. Maribel, what's your name now? Maribel Love, I think you call, because I think you changed your name. Rifa, and anybody else that's watching the show, that will watch the show. So the next one will be the conspiracy behind Michael Jackson's disappearance. I'm not going to call it a death. So the next couple of Black History things is, the next one is Michael Jackson, and then maybe Black Cowboys, stuff like that. So be on the lookout for that. I do have to go to, I have to go be I got to do some things tomorrow, so I don't know if I'm going to go live in the afternoon or whatever, but maybe tomorrow evening. But yeah, in the original show, Miss Meat and Key Deadman and a lot of people came through. These serious subjects and serious topics are not that popular, but they're there anyway, just in case. You know what I'm saying? So let me see what you're saying. No, I haven't. I've taken a break from NPR, even though I'm a big fan. I used to have to drive an hour and a half an hour and a half one way, every other Sunday. And I used to get all my KQED, 60 Minutes, NPR, NPRI. One time, a show called News and Notes did a show on me, and the reporter name was wow, I can't think of her name. She was from Cameroon, and I think her name was, it's one of those names, like Alibaba or something. But she was cool, she was really cool. I really liked their editing job, like the way they edited everything. And she interviewed me and my friend inside the office of a black jazz cafe, and we didn't know them from Adam, and they let us use their office to do the interview. And she used one of those recorders that you would see in BBC radio, and she had an English accent. She had really chocolate skin. She was Muslim, but her name was like Alibaba or Baba. Her name was straight up, just straight foreign, like. But if you never saw her, because of how she spoke and her accent, you would have thought she was Caucasian. But she was the total opposite. Not even a Christian. You know what I'm saying? And then, but yeah, I haven't seen that. I'm gonna have to look it up on the NPR app or something like that. I'm gonna have to check that out. But yeah, I'm going to sign out here and get back to work, doing some. I'm using my new slide pod. Look that up. SLYPOD. Cost me half a stack, and I've been doing some experimental recording. Also, I got this app called Clips that you can do some really cool green screen stuff as long as you got good lighting. You don't even need a green screen. So I'm going to play around with that for the next couple of videos. You're going to see me standing in Japan. You're going to see somebody standing behind me getting ready for a Western duel and all kind of stuff like that. It's really amazing. But I'm going to have to look into that. But yeah, on the same channel that NPR comes on out here, there's also KQED, MPI, and on Sundays at a certain time, 60 Minutes come on. But I must say, ever since this Corona thing came out, I've been on a hiatus from listening. So I need to get back to that. And on that note, I just want to say thanks for showing up and showing out, and peace and hair grease.